Hi, Stacy and John.
Hi.
Uh,
Hey.
I had no formal, real start to this in some way. Other than I think to try to talk about the purpose of this for a second, um, and then hopefully dive into a bit of our relationship, and I think where I came in this moment with you all that we're trying to archive and record about. And that now it has been, a little over 2 months or about a month and a half since we started a conversation about working through a search process for John's successor as John prepared to enter a new chapter or a different chapter in the book of his life, as well as Stacy, you coming on as executive director, coming at a moment for the Lark and for the world that was of immense change. And I think I was honored to be recommended and asked around working with you all and learning more about the Lark, about its history, and about this moment of transition you all are in. And what I was so impressed by every time I left a meeting with you all was such a deep resonance of sense of purpose, sense of self, um, and yet also understanding and dealing with contradictions of what it means to be in a moment of change, both on a field-wide level, but also on an organizational level, and likely on even a personal level. And I just thought these people are great human beings. There's no, not only is this a great organization, but that these folks are such great human beings. And so was interested to intersect with you both and try to use this archiving and these recordings to work through how a search process works and some of the deep conversations that we had when I started investigating and working with you all in our first initial call. And I think my first question was, what is this moment for both of you and this moment of transition? Uh, and and where do you find yourselves? And I know that might be a strange place to sort of start from the end in many ways around where an organization is going. But, John, maybe you can take first about, when you and I talked, that there was such a clear vision from you and purpose for the Lark that at least I felt like when I was talking with both you and Stacy, that there was something at least accomplished or achieved that made ready for this moment, not only for you, but for the Lark community. So I guess the initial question is just, where are you right now in this moment? And I think you as John, the artistic director of the Lark, but also you as John, the human being.
Wow, that's a deep question. And we've
Feel
had
free.
quite a few conversations amongst the three of us, and Stacy and I have been digging into this since she moved into this new role quite a lot. But I guess the question has to do with what is this moment, and what does it mean to me, and what does it mean to the organization, and what does it mean to the people who've made the organization be what it is. And it's interesting. We're always part of a community trying to find uh, a way to hold our values. And for many, many years, I worked with an evolving community uh, to support writers who interested me, who continually challenged what other people thought the theater was, what other people thought uh, normal life was. And you know, in many, many ways, the theater was a place where people came together as a community to engage in difficult conversations. And what has evolved in such beautiful ways in all that time, and in particular in the last decade, and then again in the last 5 years, is is that the community that I was engaged in has really um, been the underpinning for the Lark as an idea and a phenomenon. And, you know, in many ways, we become habituated to holding on to the things we create because we don't want it to fall down. I mean, I have two kids, you know, who are about the same age as the Lark, frankly. Um, and you know, we want them not to scrape their knees, and we want them to do the things they want. Um, and we hold on, uh, partly because we identify so they are us and we are them. And it's become just so clear, you know, it's always been clear that there are artists and people on our staff and champions of the organizations who've come forward and defined the Lark in brave and bold new ways. But in this present moment, the last 5 years, there has been so much participation in building our community that our community has become a real community. It isn't just a community that comes the way it did at 9/11 when, you know, I put out a call and said, does anybody feel lonely and want to come together and talk? This community is being called to account and to action by a large group of people who see that what we do here is create space for people to be heard. And to me, um, just the recognition that there are people in this organization who care for the organization as much as I do, who care for these values and see these values in new and different ways, is so beautiful to me. And I think that the main learning that I'm doing, because we in the arts understand that learning never stops, is just how to stop and listen to how other people see the future moving forward. And sometimes when we're building an organization or making a growing organization uh, uh, sustainable, or all of this language that we use in sort of the administrative life of cultural institutions, we just forget that sometimes there is no emergency, there's just the moment. And to me, the kinds of things I've learned in long, difficult conversations with Stacy, uh, other members of our team, members of my family, um, the questions of the things that I actually want to do in my life or felt I had given up in order to make the Lark strong, and the kinds of feelings I sometimes had that I was doing it on my own. Um, those aren't true, and they have never been true, that there are people who actually want to form community in this way. And so to me, it's a moment of transition for me where I feel as though I'm actually opening my eyes for the first time in a long time, trying, after straining to move something forward, and really looking around at the people who are capable of taking it into the next generation. And this gives me the freedom to actually reflect, I think, on the kinds of things I've learned over the last 25 years in a way that I haven't been able to in the last couple of years. So I'm just incredibly excited and open to this experience.
I think that's beautiful, and I want to get to some of those long and difficult conversations in a moment, or at least I think organizationally. But Stacy, want to turn to you too about, you know, coming in as an executive director and executive leader, and essentially having you know, a huge not only just a challenge, of course, but with the pandemic, but also just a moment of a major transition for an organization. You know, not only on the artistic side, but also on the executive side. And wondering where are you at this moment, you know, as someone who's been working and affiliated with the Lark for a while, but now is its executive leader and looking for a new artistic collaborator.
Yeah, thank you, Al. I could say that I have never had a job. I'm a reform stage manager. That's what I did in my previous life, and that's a big job. This job is the hardest job I've ever had, and I say that because the level of responsibility um, is so important, um, and there is no area that is of less importance than another for me. When I took over the role, our organization was going through just culturally, cultural challenges. And so me as a staff member and my perspective of those challenges, um, from being inside the staff versus those challenges as a leader, are two completely different perspectives, even though one informed the other. Um, I, hear John when he talks about, going for so many years feeling like he was by himself. And the moments when I also feel like, the moments I can look back and feel like I had no, even though I had people around me, just feeling like no one could really help me where I was. Um, and so, when I first took the position, when I first accepted it, it was back in January, as an idea. And I, I just got the idea that I would just kind of still be doing my role as director of operations, except, I may have a different relationship to the board, but I felt like my job wouldn't change all that much. And then COVID hit, and it created such a cascade between what we were going through before the transition was announced culturally, and COVID, the impact of COVID impacted our culture in such a way that I really questioned at moments whether we would survive, because um, there was such a commitment to people, which has always been our commitment. Um, and at the same time, our sustainability was jeopardized in a way that, in my experience, in the 5 years I had been here, I had never seen. And you know, I was director of operations for 2 years before COVID. But this isn't ultimately my training. I've evolved my way through. I've been promoted through the organization itself, and so when COVID hit, I couldn't tell whether it was just me not being able to manage things initially, or whether it was COVID. I couldn't tell. And John was going through, we were both going through the transition, so neither of us could really be that foundation of clarity, because no one was in clarity. No one was clear about how to deal with this moment. And so it was really, those first few months were so incredibly hard, because, trying to be a supportive leader in a moment that no one has ever experienced before is daunting for the oldest leader, someone who's been there for 50 years. And so it was truly, what do they call that? Trial by fire. Mm-hmm. And, but what it forced me to do was to challenge every natural instinct of leadership that I had up until that point. I come from a corporate, a corporate mindset as it relates to leadership. It's, I'm the boss. this is what I need, and this is what I pass that need on, and then the team provides that need. I just realized really quickly that this is not, that way of thinking is not going to work in this new environment. And so I realized, and this wasn't anything that I spoke out loud to anyone, but I had to learn really quickly what it meant to be a servant leader. And not because that was necessarily the kind of leadership that I chose, but the kind of leadership that I knew the organization absolutely was. And in my commitment to the organization, the commitment to myself, as opposed to running, which I thought about too, I decided to surrender to what was before me. And it took me, definitely, like working with the staff and finding finding those relationships, new relationships, a new dynamic to them, a new relationship to them. And in a moment where they so needed and wanted support from leadership, but at the same time feeling, kind of hesitant around leadership and figuring out exactly how to be that for them. And that took several months. It took time to find that. But now I can say that I've learned so much from them. And from their commitment to the community, on what it means to have people as your purpose. And when that phrase just came up for me, and I realized that, oh, okay, so this is what I'm here for. Yeah, I'm leading the organization, but ultimately my purpose is to take care of people here. And I look at our community as the artists, the staff, and our board and donors, and our partners. That is my community. And my job is to provide them with what they need in order to be the best steward of this organization that we can all be. And once I got clear about that, even though the job didn't get easier, it got clear. And I think that now I'm feeling like I can rest in that perspective, and it gives me a foundation to work from. And so while I totally can identify with John feeling alone sometimes, I think knowing that my commitment and our commitment is to each other really sets the stage for human relationships in a way that can only make us better.
I think overall, I was surprised, coming in as a potential advisor and thinking, well, usually, yes, I have to be the one to create the process. And yet you all had done so much work that in many ways makes me more of a facilitator and question asker, and helping to keep you all on par, than trying to go through a very formal process. And yet it will be formal. And I wonder if either one of you all can talk about the formation of this process and how that came about. That this isn't a process trying to take transparency and access and inclusion all into account. And wonder if you all can talk a little bit about that. Where did that process start? John knows, hey, it's time to go. It's time to start this. And what pillars did you all start to take and put together to form a process that you all feel like, hey, this is solid, this is good?
Well, we began with John just, us just thinking about people that we thought would be great, And they're all from our community. But at first, John and I were just setting up meetings and talking with folks. But as we began to, when the BIPOC demand, that was when the What document came out. And we saw these questions about, access and at the leadership level. We began to think about, okay, well, are we being as inclusive in this process as we can? And I always go back to the staff because they are really just always just right there when it comes to our values. And they were actually mixed on it. There were some who felt like, we could we should do a public process so that everyone had access. And then some had, well, we could just come from the community. And some were the concerns were, broad about money and time and how can we do it all. And so we just began to put feelers out for folks who could help us. And in the meantime, John began to craft a spreadsheet, just keeping track of the people that we knew we wanted to reach out to, keep the feedback we were getting from the staff. And over time, it just kept feeding out into one day we just talked it through, like what would be a process that would be inclusive, that what we knew we wanted a process that included our staff and our community, that the artists, we knew that we wanted them to have a say in it. And we knew that ultimately it would be the board's decision. So the idea was, how can we create a collaborative process? And that's how the idea to have two artists, two staff on the selection committee. And then having the candidates meet with staff and meet with artists without leadership present, so that they can begin to just ask, feel free to vet the candidates as well. And we came up with the process that we have that's incredibly intensive, but we feel like really goes deep into making sure that everyone has some input and awareness about how the decision's being made.
I just want to say that there all of that was so organic in the sense that even in the beginning of thinking about who might play an artistic director role, and there's a larger story to tell because my role as artistic director and founder is different than what the new artistic director's role is going to be, because we've been creating capacities in the organization for fundraising and administration and communications that didn't exist in the past. But when we started to reach out to people, Stacy and I agreed we were going to reach out to a bunch of people who we could say to them, we would feel that we could say, you'd be an incredibly interesting artistic director at the Lark, but we're not talking to you about that. We want to talk to you because you also have a deep connection to the Lark. And going back to this question of community and conversation, we want to have a conversation with you about where do you see the Lark going, especially as events were evolving, COVID and the civil rights questions that are coming to the fore more and more. What do you see us doing? And the process of those conversations led us to some of these conclusions and some of the places we went in a very organic way. And that was incredibly gratifying. So I feel as though, if you step back and you look at questions of organizational evolution, and I say now, and I think it's true, that I wish I had the maturity of thought and the wisdom that I've learned from my peers 5 years ago to begin this process. Even a year and a half ago, people would say, when I'd say, oh, one day when I can actually focus on a few projects of my own, when I'm not so worried about the fragility of the organization, that they'd say, well, but you have to keep that to yourself. I don't mean to go back to the my personal mythology or pathology around, feeling too alone. But it's been very, very meaningful to recognize that I'm not alone, and that it all changes when conversation starts to happen, and conversation isn't conversation unless both sides are listening. So I think a lot of learning has been happening in that process, and it led to very tangible things. I mean, I'm the artistic director, but of course I made a spreadsheet. But the spreadsheet was really to sort of put together the things we were learning so that they just wouldn't live in abstract space, that they actually lived in a particular place, and it included steps we started to think, moved us towards where we were going. We wanted to make sure that anytime we had a conversation with someone who taught us something, that we actually put that something in a repository. By the time you came, Al, we actually had a kind of a way of framing out, some of the thinking we'd been doing.
I find myself on the spectrum end, thinking as a manager, as a consultant as well, about, gosh, I simultaneously love and hate this field all at the same time. And yet I think that's the messiness of passion, right? Passion isn't about being so caught up that you are in a celestial state. Passion, I think, is about the range of emotions and state that you can feel about one person or one topic. It's the reason that we get so angry or upset about particular aspects of either a word on the page, or the way a person is going, an actor is going to move, or the way a light is going to hit the stage, and understanding that how do you manage that, how do you lead that, and finding, I think, a leader that understands, passion is about the range of an emotion within people.
And how do you hold space for
how do you
all
hold
of that,
exactly,
all of those colors, without taking it internal,
yes.
and allowing yourself to be just as messy, right? Because that means creating a culture where that, and that's what we talk about at the Lark, being whole. You have being heard and being whole, that you can bring whoever you are, however you're feeling that day, to the space, and it's okay because it's yours.
Mm-hmm.
And empowering you to say the same thing. It's okay because it's yours.
I think it'll be curious as we're going through and talking with different people. What does that look like in a candidate? What does that feel like in a person? Right. In a leader, in terms of their philosophy and how they want to guide an organization. Because I think that both of you also are hinting at the changing role of an artistic director, the changing role of executive leadership in theaters. That it is about how do you lead and coach a team of people, and yet how do you also separate what, for example, I may think is best as Al, the practitioner, versus putting on my hat of what is best for the Lark. What is best for the organization. And I'll be curious as we're going through, and going through this process and hearing from people of, well, what does this person sound like? What does this person feel like? What does this person look like? What skills does this person have? And that's something I'm at least taking forward with me. Go ahead, John.
I say the small is always within the large, right? We are the child we were, and we are always that small and growing. And it's just so interesting that we've known for a long time, and the staff knows this, that within the artistic conversation at the Lark, within a room where a play is being shared by a brave writer who's opening up their heart and dream to a group of people for the first time, and a group of people who are there to support that person in confidence in their dream, and to, I guess at the Lark, the main thing that we do is to put people in the position to guide their own process, to live by their own light and their own vision. And this has always existed within the organization and has been the reason that people come to it, and the reason I think that people go from it changed. And to take, as I think everybody in the organization is trying to do right now, to take this experience of the creative process in a room where you feel safe but challenged, and to apply it to the institution itself. You know, how do we do that? You know, how do we do that? And I think we've been thinking about this for quite a while in fits and starts. And this is really, you know, in this moment of a founder leaving, in this moment of people, of Stacy and other people who have grown in the organization because they believe in it and they've brought so much to it into leadership roles. How do we? Because there's always this thing in our lives and in the politics of our lives where things get to a point, where any business gets to a point where it starts to become institutionalized. And I say that with the negative connotation. It starts to become, this is how we do it. And how do we go to what it means to be in a room where people are acknowledging that nobody has ever thought that before, that what is being thought could be the thing that changes all our lives for the better, even if, and maybe not. But how do we go with that kind of wonder and into a space of trying to create a community and a conversation on a larger level that doesn't feel like it's insubstantial because it's not built on structures and expectations, but that doesn't feel, on the other hand, institutional and you know, now everybody do it this way.
Yeah, for sure. I think in the last, you know, just in about the last few minutes, you know, Stacy, is there anything you'd like to add to that? In particular, just moving forward, you know, this is one part, but, you know, we're about to dive into another area that gets even more tactile and real. But wondering if you've had any final thoughts in the last few minutes, just on where we've been so far.
Yeah, no, I think that there is so much that we've gained that is not repeatable. Like we will never have an opportunity to get what we just got. And it has edified me so much. And I have accepted this process as process, because that's what we're about, right? But I have accepted it for myself personally as a process that and I don't know what each day is going to bring, but what I know that I'm committed to is as long as everyone's willing to rock with us, that I got you, you know, and we're gonna figure it out together. That I'm sure about, that we will figure it out. I really am just excited for a new partner. Because there's just so much value that we can bring. Yeah, that's it.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. I got you, and we're gonna figure out how to make this happen. We gonna get through it. I love it. Well, I think with that, if you all feel good, I think we can stop there.
I think so.
Thank you, Al.
Thank you so much,
Thank you,
Al.
Stacy.
That was lovely.